If your state of mind is a state of mind that doesn't need correction, then your state of mind is a state of mind that I wish that I had. Because state of mind is something that people can say is their state of mind of goodness, when their state of mind of goodness is a state of mind that lacks goodness. If their state of mind is good, then you've got a good life. If your state of mind is bad, then your life can be pretty miserable. But if you're a person that doesn't have a state of mind, then a state of mind is something that you can have if you try to have a better state of mind. But having a state of mind that doesn't have a good state of mind is something that you can also earn. You can earn it by not being the person that has a good state in their existence, by being people that make bad choices, by being people that use their life to make lesser lives, by trying to be bad people in their lives. And you're bad people in your life, which brings bad energy, which in the end gives bad energy to other people that cross your path, that are in your lives. And if a person comes into your life and there's someone that's good and then there's someone that's bad, it can be a difficult choice to go ahead and remove them from your life. Because when you're someone that has made a good choice by having had that person in your life, but now that life is something that you don't want in your life anymore, it can be a difficult choice for you to remove them from your life simply because they are not a beneficial part of your life. If you're an addict like me who has no addiction really right now, then you're an addict who knows that you're in the clear and your mind is clear and you can think clear. Your emotions are there and they're a little more clear and you can understand clearly what it is that you experience as an addict who is active. And it doesn't take long. If it's heroin, it takes longer. If it's meth, it doesn't take that long, at least for me. Meth was my drug of choice, and meth was something that I used hard. And I was an addict who didn't have really much expectation that I was going to live, because when I used pretty recklessly, and being reckless is something that people with a negative state of mind can find themselves doing more and more and more. My addiction wasn't something that ruled me because I was able to keep my life. I was able to make good choices. I was able to work for most of the time, and I was able to slowly diminish my work to then suddenly lose it. See, I was a tennis coach, a private tennis coach, and I was able to keep a lot of my students even when my addiction flared up again. And I kept it away from my students, and I kept it away from their lives, and I kept it away from the lives of the people that mattered to me. My children weren't aware of when my addiction flared up, and they were unaware that I ever had an addiction until they were older, when I put them down, sat them down at the dinner table, and I told them exactly what Dad was going through. Because I felt my addiction was starting to get out of hand, and it was something that I didn't want them to have to find out on their own by surprise. They weren't aware of my addiction because they weren't aware that Dad had an addiction to drugs, and it wasn't something that they ever experienced at home, because when they were that age, my ex-wife and I were already divorced for a couple of years, and it was something that we were able to insulate them from, even though she knew about my addictive personality and my previous addiction to cocaine. I had an addiction to cocaine, and it was something that I used and I binged on it, but it was a problem in our marriage, and she suffered through it, but she never shared it with the kids. I mean, we had times where the kids were aware that something was going on wrong, but it wasn't as a result of my addiction to cocaine. And it was something that cocaine did to me that I just didn't like. It took me away from my family. It took me away from my life. It took me away from the people that I cared about. And it was something I did, same as addicts do. Any addict does when they isolate from the people that they love and the families that they love and the people that matter to them. They can lean on people that are addicts like them, and they can be the people that tell addicts that they're the addicts that can save them. And if you're with an addict that tells you that they can save you, then they're an addict that's a liar. Because an addict that tells you that is an addict that doesn't know how to be a better person, because they're lying to you about how they can't save themselves. They're telling you that they're going to save you or help you when they're not able to control their own addiction. If you're someone that has that personality, and that was me, I did that a lot, but I was able to muscle through it. I was able to make a difference in people's lives, even though my addiction was something that did rule me. It ruled me to the point where I ended up losing all of my clients. I ended up losing all of my students, and I ended up losing my students by voluntary means primarily. I would drop students just because I would cancel practices, and I would be the coach that wouldn't show up for practice simply because I didn't want to expose anybody to my addiction. Parents and students and their families were aware that I had a problem. They didn't know the degree or what severity the problem was, but they were very gracious with me. And some were so loyal to the point that I had to fire them. I had to let them go. I told them, I can't teach your student. I can't teach your kid because I don't feel good about the person that I am. I'm not a good role model, although I talked it good and I could lecture and I could teach it. And I had life lessons for the kids about trying and not giving up. And they were lessons that I gave extremely well on the court, and they benefited mostly from the talk. I think I was a good technical coach, and a lot of the students that I taught became really good players, and they were players that had a really smooth technique. Technique was my specialty. Technique was what I was known for, and technique was something that I still admire when I watch tennis even now. But if you're someone who is an addict, who doesn't have anything to admire, then you're an addict that has something that they need to do to change the way that they look at life and they live life. An addict that has a problem with their addiction out of control is an addict that can regain control of their mind first. If you're able to suspend how much you use, or you're able to just be sober for a brief period of time, it can be the days in between uses, because when meth is something that you can go ahead and you can run yourself into the ground, where you can stay up for days and then you crash, and when you crash you sleep, and you'll sleep for days if that's the kind of meth addict you are. And that's the meth addict that I was. I would sleep for days, and after not eating for days and not drinking for days very well, and for staying up for days, you'd be tripping balls and seeing imaginary things. You'd be in what's called meth psychosis. And meth psychosis is an ugly place to be, because meth psychosis is something that can be extremely dangerous. And if you're a meth addict that has meth psychosis, and I know what that's like, you're an addict that I know has had it rough, because when you know what meth psychosis can be like, meth psychosis can mess up your sense of reality really bad. You can feel that things are real that are not. You can feel that you're in danger when you're not. You can feel that people are traitors when they're not. You can tell friends some of the most ugly things and make them feel like they don't belong in your life, or that they're somehow involved in something that's only going on in your head. And they cannot convince you otherwise. They become your enemies in your mind, but you try to hold on to that friendship, because when you get in the clear, when you come down and your mind is no longer full of that mess, you're clear enough where you can go ahead and know that reality is not that your friend is an enemy traitor, that your friend is still your friend. You still feel fear, you still feel doubt, and that's something that can linger in a meth addict that has had severe meth psychosis at times, or for extended periods of times. I would go into it and then I'd come out of it, and I'd go into it and I'd come out of it. And I was lucky more than most, I believe, because I'm the one that didn't get lost in my meth psychosis. There's a phrase, you don't come back. If you go into meth psychosis, you go into this alternate reality is what happens. And it's not uniform for everybody. It's different for everybody. But the meth psychosis I would go in was pretty damn ugly. It was about traitors. It was about death. It was about the most awful things. It was about the things that made me feel like I was a useless human being. And it was all in my head, and it was all something that I didn't evenly keep in my head, because when I thought that things really were happening in real life, I hurt people. And I didn't hurt people physically. I hurt them emotionally by being a bad person in their life. I would feel that they were a liar. I would feel that they were a cheat. I would feel that they were a thief, and I would feel that they were disloyal. I would feel that their affection towards me wasn't real, or I feel that somehow they just weren't genuine, even though they kept coming back, and they didn't always want to use drugs with me. They wanted just to see how I was, or just spend time in my house and just be somewhere where they didn't have to have all of the rigmarole of what is a meth addict's life when they are actively out on the street. And meth addicts that I knew were pretty awful to know, because I didn't like hanging around meth addicts. Meth addicts are not horrible people, but meth addicts tend to be a little twitchy, a little bit just paranoid, a little bit like you don't want to be around them, and they'll rob you. I mean, addicts will rob you. That's a plain ass fact. If you're somebody who has an addict in your house and they're in active addiction, and they keep talking miserable, and they keep talking about the world's against them, and they keep talking about that they don't have any money, and they keep talking about what they need, and then they keep kind of insinuating that they need to get high because they need to get well. If a heroin addict and a meth addict, I don't know. I wouldn't run out of money to need meth, and I was lucky and unlucky in that regard. A person like me that has the financial means to have their own addiction paid for, essentially, and not have to hustle, and not have to steal, and not have to somehow scrape their ways to get money by demeaning themselves, or by lessening themselves, or by doing things that weren't legitimate, crimes that they would commit in order to get money. Boosting is a big thing that's common in the addict world. Boosting is like the number one thing, I think, where people get money. They take something from the store, they go ahead and turn it in for cash, or they turn it in for a refund, they get a gift card, and then they go ahead and turn that around into cash. And there's a lot of abuse of the social if I don't want to talk about it, I probably shouldn't talk about it. But social welfare is something that addicts take part of, just because they're unemployed. And it's great if you need the help, because you can eat all the time. There's there's something called EBT cards. And EBT cards are basically debit cards, and debit cards to get refilled once a month. And what an addict will do, if an addict needs to do it, is they'll go ahead and buy groceries for somebody who will go ahead and say if they bought $100 worth of groceries, the person that bought the groceries will give them $50, and the addict would charge $100 on the EBT card. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because when an addict doesn't have the means or the resources to continue their addiction, they will commit crimes. There is no doubt, absolute. They will commit crimes. They will compromise their morality. They will use their bodies in order to get money. They will use their morality as a way to justify things that they should do or they could not do otherwise if they were sober. They would compromise their moral compass in order to do things that normally they would not do if they were sober. Once you get sober, that moral compass comes back, and it comes back. And that morality that you had before is something you did not lose. It is there, and it is something that can scare addicts really bad because they think that they lost all of their moral guidance and their own ability to make choices that are good and that affect their world in a better way. Their state of mind is wrecked from the addiction that they have to fight. And it's a fight that they have when they're fighting their addiction in that way. They have to fight the morality that they brings them shame. They have to fight for money in order to be able to score and get their drugs. They have to fight the desire, the lack of desire, or just the bad choice of knowing that if they do something that's illegal, they might get arrested and have to go to jail or prison. And sometimes there is a lot of betrayal within the dope world, so to speak. The dope world, as I describe it, is a world of which addicts exist. It's not a dope world where those who distribute drugs at a higher level, who move weight, or are in an organized crime scenario are not involved. This is not the dope world that I'm talking about. It's a small world because of small people that have reduced themselves to a small existence where they do small things like use drugs and they do small things like small crimes. They're not criminals of a real big nature, not at all. They can commit serious crimes because addiction can take you to those serious places that you can do those serious crimes simply because you're an addict that may be taken advantage of by someone who wants to use you for a serious crime or use you in a serious crime, and you're the fall person for that. You're compromised mentally. You're not as sharp mentally. You're physically in danger of being over fucking come by people that are more fit or not addicts like you. You can be taken advantage of, but when you're an addict who's a meth addict or a heroin addict or a fentanyl addict, which are basically the same thing, fentanyl and heroin, you're an addict that doesn't realize how weak you are. You will get your ass kicked by a relatively healthy person that may not know how to fight, and an addict that is an addict on the street that does not have any kind of physical fighting training or just is a badass with the mouth is going to get wrecked by any person that just does not like what they say, who has 3 square miles a day, maybe goes to the gym a little bit, and just can overwhelm them physically. You're slow, you're low, you're slow to react. And it isn't a universal truth, but the thing is, those drugs give you the illusion and the delusion that somehow you're a badass when you need to be. The situations that you deal with on the street are not badass at all. You're dealing with the other people who are addicts. You don't mix with the people who are normies, the people who are regular folk, who go around their business, go about their business, who live around you if you're a homeless addict. You don't deal with them because you don't have to deal with them because they're not part of your world. You might want to rob them. You might want to rob their houses. You might want to jack their cars, or that's a pretty serious crime, but you may want to go ahead and break a window and steal the shit that's in their car. Now, addicts will have a higher moral, somehow, reflection of themselves, and that somehow they're good people and they won't do shit like that. But every single one of them, pretty much, without fault, will compromise their principles. Again, this does not mean that those people are bad people. They are slaves to a drug. Their choices are slave to the drug that drives them to make choices to feed their addiction. It is a difficult way for an addict to live when choice is removed from them, but they still have the choice to not commit the crime, to not steal, to not compromise their morality, to not make the choices that make their state of mind less. And if you're an addict like that, then you're an addict who can resist the temptation, can resist that moment where you're going to make a bad choice. And when you make good choices, you make yourself closer to a better life. You make it so that you can have a better state of mind. Even if you're a shit state of mind and you feel like the world is against you and everything is falling apart, You can make one good choice, which can mean a little bit of relief that makes you feel a little bit good, that can give you enough relief to make another good choice, that can make a better choice. And any choice that adds to your life, including eating or sleeping or drinking fluids or calling a loved one or going to the store and legitimately somehow doing something, helping somebody, being a friend to someone. These are all positive choices. A negative choice is anything that feeds your addiction, that makes your addiction worse, but also feeds your addiction in a way that you are a worse person for it. An addict knows if they're a worse person because of their addiction. They know it cold, and they don't need anyone to tell them what they are, because they know it and what they are, and they will lie through their teeth into your face and tell you they're none of that. But the truth is they are that, no matter what. If an addict says they're a good person, they are. But do they make bad choices and do commit crimes? They do. Could you be a victim of them? Not likely if they're talking to you respectful and you're being kind to them. Not likely. But if you're someone who treats them like shit, or someone who betrays them in a way that the addict may feel you betrayed them because maybe you made a promise to help them and you didn't come through, that makes you ripe to be someone that they're going to go ahead and commit a crime against, rob or steal, or take something of yours and then turn it into money. Addicts can do that. Addicts are very fastidious in the way that they try to commit crimes, but they just can't commit crimes because they can't be good criminals. They're not good criminals whatsoever because they cannot come through. If you're a criminal of any great degree, then you can keep a job, because it takes dedication and it takes commitment and it takes consistency to be a great criminal. And if you're a great criminal, I'm guessing that you ain't on the street. I'm guessing you got a place, you got a spot, and if you're getting high, you're a dangerous ass criminal too, because you're someone who can handle your shit and still keep your shit. And that's something that I didn't do. I didn't lose my shit, but I was an addict who kept my shit. But I was not a criminal at all. I had enough resources in reserve where I never had to compromise my principles or my morality, other than the morality that I went ahead and gleefully indulged in because my addiction made me want to do that. And the description of that kind of stuff is something that would not be appropriate for this video, because it's something that is throughout the drug addict community. Sex and drugs is the number 1 and 2 things that an addict does when they're getting high. Sex and drugs are the things that happen because that's all you really got time to do, except for hustle for money if you're someone who needs to hustle for money. But sex and drugs go hand in hand. One feeds the other a lot of times, the other feeds the other a lot of the other times. Sometimes addicts who are simply one type of addict, a heroin addict, is not going to indulge so much in the sexual part, but a meth addict who is a meth addict that reacts to the sexual degree that meth can affect them is an addict that can feed that sexual addiction that will lead them to do crimes simply because they are a sex addict and a meth addict. And those things are dangerous for people to indulge because they can compromise their morality in a way that they shouldn't compromise their morality. But all that stuff, when you get sober, is left in the past, as long as you leave it in the past. But if you carry it in your present, you're carrying it in your present, and your state of mind in the present is affected in a way that you shouldn't let it affect you. Because those crimes can be severe, but most of the part, they're crimes that you committed simply to feed your addiction. And if you had sex escapades, which a lot of drug addicts do, you all have stories of freaky dicky shit that you did with somebody, with more than one person, with a different person of a different sex or a different whatever, right? And you did shit that you normally wouldn't do because you were freaky as hell. It can do that to you, and you don't realize exactly how much freaky you're getting. And freaky can be something that you regret, but freaky is something that happens, and that's something that I don't really like to talk about because it was not something that I wanted to be. But it's not something that I aspired to be. But love is an important part of sex, and sex is an important part of love. And when you talk about freaky things, love, when you do them in love, with love, it's not freaky when you do it because you're in a relationship, a committed relationship that is bound in love. Freaking could be something you do with a stranger that you would consider something you do with someone you love, and it just be hot. That's the difference. So if you're a meth addict, you're a heroin addict, you're a fentanyl addict, you're not fucked completely. Your life is not over. You may feel like it's over. You may feel every day that everything is going against you. But if you're an addict that's still alive, you got a chance to get sober, because you're a chance to be a better life, because you can be a better life, because you're alive, and that's fucking badass that you're alive. And you're making it through, and that's badass that you're making it through. But if you're making it through and you're committing crimes and shit like that, or you just want to fuck somebody up because you just don't want to be alone in your addiction, then you're a piece of shit. You shouldn't be free. You're a piece of shit who shouldn't have a regular life until you're ready to help other people. And you got to help yourself first before you can help other people. You can't help somebody if you're fucking up all the time and you're fucking getting them drugs and keeping them in your house or keeping them in your home, which is something that I can relate to, but it's not something that I did at the time willfully, and that I did it with the intention of entrapping somebody in my life. If I did stuff that I don't want to talk about, it's simply this. I didn't have to get drugs for people. I didn't get drugs for people for a specific reason, and the specific reason, whatever it might be, is none of your fucking business, anyone. But the business is that if I did anything, it was between consenting adults, and although people may disagree about the state of mind and consent, it's something that two fucked up people might have done. But if they complain about it, it's pretty certain that they're not going to want to talk about it. But if it was consenting, it's consenting, because consenting can be construed as an illegitimate act. And when consenting is done with addicts every single day in that state of condition, in that state of mind, it's something that would be a massive freaking moral clusterfuck to try and break up into something that makes sense, that everybody can agree is the right thing to agree on. But if something like that ever to happen, then I don't know where I'd be. I'd be like, I don't give a shit. But if the person was damaged by it and they could blame me for damaging them, then I would have to I would have to own up to it if it was something that I felt I had to own up with. And that's not my alarm to finish, but that's not my alarm to finish. That's my alarm. I got to go take a friend to work. That's a friend of mine that I need to help, so I didn't get to work. And she's working, and she's trying hard to be good. And she's somebody that's trying hard, and I respect that. And there are people like that who try hard, who work. And they may have a problem, and her problem is none of your fucking business too. But if I help them, no matter what, I'm the one that gets to help them. I'm not the one that has to help them. And when they're appreciative and they're respectful and they're kind and they are nice about it and they're not rude and they have gratitude. Gratitude is simply thank you, a smile, all right, or just a story about how they're trying to do things better. And when they do things better, you can see it. You can see it in their face. You can see it that they smile. You can see it in their attitude. And you can see it in their state of mind. And when you see a better state of mind than what you saw a previous day, for somebody that likes to help people like me, that's a beautiful thing to see. And I saw one today, and I saw it in my friend that I got to go help. So I got to skedaddle, and I got to go help them. And I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.